This demo will cover how Workato can be used for internal multi-step processes. Let's start with the customer onboarding business process automation using choreography pattern. First, the sales team receives a closed-won opportunity in Salesforce, which kicks off the automation. The opportunity details are published as a message to a topic using Workato's pub/sub messaging. In step 2, we see the message broker streaming the messages in real time to all the subscribers. Various subscribers receive the message in real time and execute specific tasks. Like in step 3, the customer success team sets up onboarding task list in Jira, and in step 4, we see the finance team generating invoice, and so on. This choreography pattern provides independence to each workflow and improves the fault tolerance as well. After logging into Workato, the users will see the projects first. These are repositories holding integration assets like recipes and connections. Let's start the build by setting up a pub/sub topic for publishing the new opportunities. For that, I will go to the Tools menu in the left navigation panel and select the pub/sub tool. We see several topics that are active here. I'll set up a new topic and give it a name Opportunities Closed Won and define the schema for the topic. I can do this by adding one field at a time or simply paste the JSON schema as a whole. Workato's pub/subs are built using Kafka and they provide enterprise-grade streaming capabilities. Now let's create a recipe that will publish new opportunities to this topic. Let's start with a new recipe and give a meaningful name to it. A Workato recipe has a trigger, an event that kicks off the automation. The Salesforce trigger in Workato supports different trigger types like polling, real-time, batch triggers, and platform events. We choose the trigger that fetches updates to the opportunity object. I can easily create a Salesforce connection by authenticating with my Salesforce account credentials. Workato uses OAuth for secure authentication. Here, we will configure the trigger to fetch changes made to the opportunity object. Additionally, I will also configure the SOQL-where clause to filter for only closed-won opportunities. Next, we will define the period of time from which we will fetch the changes to the opportunity data. For this, we can use the time machine feature to set the cursor of time. For complete historical load, I can set the beginning of time. In this example, I will set the cursor an hour back. From this point on, the trigger will ensure we will process all changes only once and there are no duplicates. Next, we add an action to get additional details on the account associated with the opportunity and passing the account ID coming from the trigger event. Before adding any more changes, let's test the recipe we built so far. In Salesforce, let's generate a closed-won opportunity for New Age Marketing Product Upgrade request. The event is received in Workato successfully, and looking at the output of the trigger, we can see the details of the opportunity. Now we can add the action to publish message and choose the pub/sub topic which we created earlier. We can see the message fields are populated based on the schema which we created in the topic. A cool way to map large sets of fields with data pulls from the previous steps is to use the group mapping feature and choosing the fields and the data source. It is quite useful when we have to map hundreds of fields in one go. It is quite common to build recipes in an iterative way. To take away the burden of creating new test data every iteration, we can use the repeat job feature, which is a great way to process the same trigger event multiple times to accelerate the testing cycles. The job report shows the details on the status of a job run along with the time it took. The version tab shows the version history of the recipe. Recipes are auto version and allow rollback, so no work is lost here. With the new opportunity event published to the pub/sub topic, let's jump to the subscriber recipes. We start with the recipe to automate the creation of CS tasks for onboarding the new customer. In this recipe, the trigger is configured to subscribe to new events in the opportunity closed won topic. Next, the list of onboarding tasks are fetched from a rules that is stored in the Workato lookup table. Then we loop through the list of tasks one at a time and create a Jira issue for each of them. Lastly, the onboarding task data is also inserted into the Customer Hub database. The next subscriber recipe is a financial automation that generates the invoice in NetSuite. The decoupled nature of the recipes makes them modular and easy to maintain by different teams. The dependency graph in Workato shows the relationship between the subscriber and the publisher recipes via the pub/sub topic. It is easy to add more subscribers over time as well. Let's first make sure the message publisher and the consumer recipes are active. In Salesforce, let's generate a new closed-won opportunity for New Age Marketing Inc., specifically for the Acme Enterprise software product. The opportunity is now generated. The publisher recipe received the job and it has published the message on the opportunity with details such as the product name, Acme Enterprise Software. The first subscriber recipe by customer success team has received the message. The recipe has populated Jira with the onboarding tasks for the customer New Age Marketing Inc. The second subscriber recipe by the finance team has received the message and created a new invoice in NetSuite. We see the new invoice in NetSuite for the company New Age Marketing Inc., specifically for the product Acme Enterprise Software. We see the respective updates made to the customer data hub. The customer success team has updated the onboarding tasks and the finance team with the invoice details. The second use case focuses on an orchestrated workflow that provisions access to several applications for a new hire joining the company. In step 1, we see that the main workflow kicks off 1 day prior to the new hire start date. It makes a call to the app provisioning workflow and it waits for the response. In step 2, the app provisioning workflow receives the call with the employee and the job related details. In the next step, it proceeds to set up provisioning for a set of apps for the employee based on the job role and also create a ticket in the ITSM application for auditing purposes. Lastly, the main workflow receives the completion of the app provisioning activity. All the steps in this orchestrated workflow are synchronous and are executed after the successful completion of the previous step. Step 1 is to build the main recipe that receives business events from the HR application and calls the app provisioning recipe. We start with the new recipe and give a meaningful name to it. First, we set up the trigger for the Workday application. We choose the trigger that can fetch updates to business objects like workers, positions, and so on. We see a consistent design experience here as the previous trigger we saw for Salesforce. We can see the time machine feature, setting the trigger conditions, and so on. We set the trigger to pick up events when there are updates to workers first. Let's set the trigger condition to receive events where the original hire date is the next day. Notice that we can use Excel-like formulas here in the input fields. The trigger guarantees to pick up all events even if the recipe is stopped and restarted after its first run. Following the trigger, we are adding a few actions to collect the position, organization, and the supervisor details from Workday by passing the reference IDs provided by the trigger as data pills. Our next step is to set up the callable recipe action. Before adding the action, let's look at the fully built app provisioning recipe. The recipe is triggered when a function call is made to the recipe. In the trigger, we define the input parameters that the recipe ingests and the results that it sends back. Defining the schema is similar to what we did in the pub/subs. Following that, the actions related to Google Workspace are set up, such as setting up user email and adding the user to the respective groups based on their job function. In Google Workspace, auto provisioning can be configured, so when an employee is added to a job group, the required software is automatically provisioned. We have added certain conditional checks to make sure this recipe is reusable to provision for employee movements or transfers use case as well. The ServiceNow actions create the ITSM ticket for the provisioning and update the status at each stage. Finally, the response is sent back to the calling recipe. Back to the calling recipe, the call action is configured now. The input fields appear here based on the parameter schema we defined in the trigger of the provisioning recipe. We add the data pills from the trigger and the actions above so the details are sent to the app provisioning recipe. Finally, the provisioning completion notification is sent via a Slack message. First, we start off in Workday by creating a new employee, Rick Hoffman, who will be joining the next day. The main recipe has received the event from Workday and it has initiated a call to the IT app provisioning recipe with all the employee details, such as the field sales AP supervisory job group. The app provisioning recipe received the call and it has completed the provisioning process and sent the response back to the main recipe. Getting the ServiceNow ticket number from job details and keying it in the ServiceNow, we can see the ticket is updated with details on each stage of provisioning for Rick Hoffman and it is finally closed and completed. In Google Workspace, new user Rick Hoffman is created and is added to the respective organizational units and to the field sales AP supervisory job group. This group addition automatically provisions the apps required to the user, as you can see here. The main recipe received the response from the provisioning recipe, and in the final step of completion, the notification is sent to the Slack channel. Once the recipes are developed and tested, using the deployments feature, the recipes and their associated assets like connections, lookup tables, and so on can be deployed easily to higher environments, like from dev to test environment here.